The atmosphere was full with laughter and music, making it appear ideal for what ought to have been the best day of my life. I'm Lisa, and I felt like a queen as I stood there in my gorgeous white gown. Everything seemed like a dream until it all suddenly collapsed. My mother-in-law's voice cut through the celebrations. "Lisa, dear, could you come here for a moment?" It was acerbic, almost insistent. I saw how stiff my mother-in-law looked as I walked up to her, but I still smiled at my friend and excused myself. There was strain in her posture, and her grin stopped short of her eyes. "What is it, Mrs. Frank?" I asked, attempting to seem nice and collected. "It's all about the way you look at me, Lisa," she added, accusingly frigid in tone. "You have scorn written all over your face, and I know what that looks like. I am the mother of your husband, and I should be treated with respect, not contempt." I was surprised by her comments, and my mind tried to figure out what she was saying. "Mrs. Frank, I believe you are misinterpreting. I respond with nothing but respect for you," experiencing a sudden sense of perplexity. Her brows narrowed as she scoffed. "Respect, huh? I notice how you sigh when I talk and how you roll your eyes at me. You believe I'm blind to it. I've even lost my children to your manipulation." Her speech became more insistent, and I sensed that visitors close by were beginning to look at us. It was hard for me to be calm. My husband Henry emerged at our side at that moment, his brow knit in worry. "Mom, what's going on here?" he inquired, glancing in our direction. "Henry, your spouse." Her voice cracking with passion, Mrs. Frank added, "She's been nothing but disrespectful to me. She's been looking down on me, and today, of all days, she's been the worst." She gripped Henry's arm as her eyes filled with tears. "Lisa, is this true?" With a confused and incredulous look on his face, Henry questioned. His eyes scanned mine, anticipating a response. "No, it's not true," I calmly but firmly said. "I have not disrespected her in any way. She is dishonest." "I'm your mother, Lisa. Could I tell you a lie?" Mrs. Frank sobbed as she tightened her hold on Henry's arm. Her face was streaming with tears, adding to the drama that was playing out in front of everyone. The world slowed down for a second, and Henry's countenance turned from worry to rage. He suddenly reached down, removed his shoe, and hit me over the head with a single blow. I remained motionless in the now quiet room as the boom reverberated, my hand automatically reaching to my burning scalp. Everyone in the vicinity gasped in disbelief, but none got up. I felt a whirlwind of emotions, including hurt, betrayal, and rage. I didn't know how to respond or what to say. "How could you?" I asked in a whisper, not addressing anyone in particular. I was questioning not only Henry and his mother, but the cosmos as well, as though trying to find an answer to this nightmare I had entered. Henry stumbled when he realized what he had done, saying, "Lisa, I didn't mean it. I was merely—" I, however, stopped him short. "No," I said, maintaining a calm tone, despite the raging tempest within of me. "You've shown me exactly who you are." The anguish of discovering my recently married partner was capable of such acts was far worse than the discomfort of being struck. Knowing that everything had changed at that instant, I turned away from them both. I turned to face the visitors. The most of them were still looking at me in startled silence, and I apologized for letting them see this. My heart was racing, but I spoke calmly. "Please keep having fun with the festivities. I need some time to myself." I left the room without waiting for an answer. The laughter had subsided and the music had stopped. Now the outer world seemed very different. The thrill and delight of that day seems like a long time ago. My mind was racing with ideas about what had just transpired when I managed to find a quiet area away from the commotion and din. How could everything have collapsed so swiftly? I had been so happy only minutes before, thinking I was starting a new chapter in my life. My entire life seemed to have turned upside down at this point. The allegations from my mother-in-law, Henry's physical attack, and the guests' critical looks were all too much to handle. I required time to reflect and take everything in. After what had transpired, could I truly stay in this marriage? Could I once more put my confidence in Henry? I stood there feeling lost and unsure of what to do next, and these questions were weighing hard on my mind. However, one thing was certain: my life had altered, and it could not be reversed. My ideal day had vanished to be replaced by something more agonizing and sinister. I was on my own now, and I had to find a way to get things done. The moment I turned away from the throng, I could hear whispering beginning behind me, but I chose not to allow them to stop me. I knew that this was not the end for me, so I held my head up. It marked the start of something novel. My head was racing with ideas for a strategy. This humiliation was not going to go unanswered. I let myself experience the feelings I had been suppressing as I entered the bridal suite's seclusion. My cheeks started to well up with tears, but these were tears of resolve as well as agony. I wouldn't break at this time. I'd avoid being a victim. I would overcome this and emerge victorious. I was more determined than ever. I realized that I had to do something after everything that had transpired. I have to stop them from getting away with this. My strategy called for gathering proof, concrete evidence of the way that Henry and his mother had treated me. I made the decision to enlist the aid of a private investigator. Mr. Justin was well known for being tactful and efficient, which made him the ideal choice for this delicate circumstance. When I phoned Mr. Justin, I said, "I need your help. Henry, my spouse, and his mother haven't exactly shown me kindness. I want proof of their actions. What kind of evidence are we looking for?" Mr. Justin questioned in a cool, collected tone. "Everything that exhibits a pattern," I said. "Abuse that is financial, emotional, or even legal. Anything that can demonstrate their actions." "Comprehensive," he answered. "I'll begin with monitoring and a background investigation. I'll investigate their money and pasts. You'll obtain what you require." Having Mr. Justin on my side gave me the impression that I was finally taking charge. I started capturing every exchange I had over the phone and in person with Henry and his mother. I required every bit of proof I could obtain. Nothing was going to be left up to chance. My dearest friend Maria became my main source of solace and support during all of this craziness. She had supported me during the whole process. I said to Maria, "Maria, I don't know how I would get through this without you on a particularly difficult day." She comforted me, saying, "You don't have to go through this alone. I'm always here to support you." "So what's the strategy?" she inquired. "I'm gathering proof," I continued, outlining my plan of action for her. "Mr. Justin is also contributing. Henry and his mother need to be exposed for what they truly are." Maria gave me a worried glance. She cautioned, "Lisa, use caution. They're not going to see this coming, and when they do, they'll be furious." I nodded and said, "I know. But I can't let them get away with this." Throughout the ensuing weeks, the proof I gathered started to accumulate. The phone calls made it evident that Henry frequently spoke in an angry and disrespectful manner. The amount of influence Mrs. Frank had over Mr. Frank's assets was made clear by the bank documents Mr. Justin discovered. A few of the transactions that we discovered were dubious and may have been fraudulent. The image grew more unsettling the more we learned. Maria and I got together one evening to go over all the results. Something immediately caught our attention as we went through the paperwork. "Observe this," I said, gesturing to many bank statements. "They're moving large sums of money, but where is it all going?" "And these emails," Maria said as she skimmed over them. "It sounds like they're planning something, but we don't know what yet." I spoke up, feeling overwhelmed by what we were learning. "We need to connect the dots," I remarked. "Emotional abuse is no longer the only issue here. A complex network of deceit and manipulation is in operation." Maria looked at the evidence in front of us, her eyes widening. "Lisa, we're onto something big here," she said, a mixture of dread and excitement in her voice. The more I examined the data, the more obvious it was that Henry's mother was not just engaging in harmful conduct. This was more than just how they treated me. They were concealing something far larger and perhaps even unlawful. I was determined to see this through to the conclusion because I could feel the truth slowly coming apart. As the days went by, my aim became more and more clear to me. I was no longer just gathering information for myself. I was discovering a tale of deception and dishonesty that had to be revealed. Years had been spent by Henry and his mother creating this web of falsehoods, but now I had the ability to destroy it all. Though much remained to be done, I was no longer the vulnerable person they had attempted to degrade. They had no idea how strong I was, and the truth will soon be revealed. This was more than simply me trying to get justice. It was about making sure they were held accountable for their deeds. I was prepared to battle, and I wasn't going to back down, even if I wasn't sure how it would end. The boom of reality that was about to rain down on them was far louder than the murmurs of that day. I would take charge of their games and no longer be a victim. As I began to put everything together and reread the documents, I came to a startling realization. My voice was hardly audible above a whisper when I stated to Maria, "I believe they are embezzling funds from Henry's company. These documents, they're incriminating." Maria gave me a serious look as she said, "Lisa, this is really serious. You need to be careful. They won't take kindly to being exposed." "I know," I replied, feeling a mix of fear and determination. "But I can't back down, not now. There's too much at stake." The evidence wasn't just about how cruel they had been to me. It pointed to serious criminal activity. I had everything I needed to make a move, and it was time to come up with a plan to bring them to justice. It was also time to take back control of my life. "Maria," I said, feeling the weight of my decision, "I'm going to expose them publicly." Maria hesitated for a moment, knowing the risks involved. "Lisa, that's risky. You're playing with fire, but if anyone can do it, it's you." With Maria by my side and the evidence in my hands, I felt stronger than I had in a long time. I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. This was about justice, about making sure Henry and his mother faced the consequences of what they had done. It was time to show the world who they truly were. The next step was clear. I had to bring everything out into the open. I decided to organize an event, pretending it was for a big announcement. I invited friends, family, and even a few media contacts, people who could help get the story out. The venue was lavish, filled with an atmosphere of excitement and curiosity. Everyone was eager to hear the news. As I stood at the front of the room, I took a deep breath. The time had come. "Thank you all for coming," I began, keeping my voice steady and my expression calm. Henry and his mother, Mrs. Frank, stood beside me, smiling. They had no idea what was about to happen. "Lisa, darling, we're so proud of you," Henry said, his voice sweet but insincere. "Whatever the announcement is, we support you." His words felt like poison, but I stayed composed. "I've gathered you all here to share some important truths," I said, pausing to gauge the room's reaction. "Truths about my marriage and about the Frank family." Mrs. Frank's smile faltered. "Truths," she repeated, her voice shaky with a mix of confusion and fear. "Lisa, what are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the abuse, the lies, and the illegal activities that have been going on behind the scenes," I said, my voice growing stronger with each word. The room went silent. The tension was thick, and all eyes were on me. "Lisa, have you lost your mind?" Henry's face turned red, his anger barely under control. "Quite the opposite, Henry," I said calmly. "I've never been more sure of what I need to do." I gestured to the screen behind me. "Exhibit A," I announced as a video started playing. It was a recording of one of our many heated, abusive conversations. The crowd gasped as they heard Henry's voice, full of anger and cruelty. The murmurs grew louder, and I saw Mrs. Frank's face go pale, her hands beginning to tremble. "This is just the beginning," I said, feeling a surge of empowerment. I held up a folder filled with documents. "These papers show financial irregularities, embezzlement, and fraud. It's all here." "You can't do this, Lisa," Henry shouted, his voice a mix of pleading and threat. "You're ruining everything." I looked him straight in the eye. "I'm not ruining anything, Henry. I'm exposing the truth, a truth that everyone deserves to see." The media personnel I had invited began clicking their cameras, capturing every moment of this dramatic revelation. There was no turning back now. This was it. "Please," Mrs. Frank's voice was barely a whisper, her confidence shattered. "Let's talk about this privately. There's no need for this public display." I shook my head. "No, Mrs. Frank, no more private discussions. The time for hiding is over." As I continued to show more evidence, the reactions in the room varied. Some guests looked shocked. Others shook their heads in disbelief. Whispers and murmurs filled the crowd, but no one could deny what they were seeing. Henry and Mrs. Frank stood frozen, the masks of respectability slipping away to reveal the truth beneath. "This is my story," I said, addressing the room. "A story of surviving abuse and standing up against injustice. I refuse to be a victim any longer." The occasion concluded with a rush of activity. As I was being surrounded by reporters, numerous guests came up to me with encouraging and uplifting remarks. It was something I had accomplished. I had revealed the reality, remaining composed and unwavering throughout. It was a triumphant moment for me as I at last got back my voice and my authority. It wasn't the end, though. The next stage was the courtroom. Here would be the ultimate resolution to all of this. Feeling a mixture of nervousness and resolve, I sat in that austere, intimidating room. Beside me, prepared to battle for justice, was my lawyer. I was prepared to see my adventure through to its absolute finish because this was its last act. Across the courtroom, I couldn't help but observe how uncomfortable Henry and Mrs. Frank were. As the trial got underway, their once confident expressions were suddenly displaying apprehension. My attorney stated, "Your Honor, we are here to present the case against Henry and Mrs. Frank in a firm and confident tone. This isn't just about a divorce, it's about years of emotional and financial abuse that Lisa has endured." From across the room, Henry leaned toward me and said, "Lisa, you're not going to win this. You're crossing a line." With a forceful yet calm voice, I addressed his eyes. "Henry, this isn't about winning. It has to do with fairness. It's about being authentic to everyone." The trial proceeded, and my attorney skillfully presented the facts. Henry's harsh statements were captured on tape, financial records showed how they had manipulated me, and all the evidence pointed to a very unpleasant existence that I had led. Every bit of evidence was indisputable. My attorney went on, "Your Honor, as you can see, the evidence is overwhelming. We are not only seeking the divorce, but also legal action for the wrongs that have been committed against my client." Clearly shaken, Mrs. Frank attempted to justify herself. "It's all simply a misunderstanding, Your Honor." She stumbled, her voice faint even to her own ears. "Lisa is exaggerating." With a steady and direct gaze, I addressed her directly. "Overdoing it. The evidence is self-explanatory. You are no longer able to run from the reality." The judge paid close attention, going over all of the testimony and supporting documentation. She issued her verdict at last, after what seemed like an age. "In light of the overwhelming evidence, I grant the divorce and order legal action against both Henry and Mrs. Frank for their conduct." I felt a sense of comfort and vindication when the gavel struck. It was finished. I had faced them head-on, taken a stand for justice, and won. I had finally concluded a protracted and agonizing chapter in my life. I realized it was time to turn the page on my legal fights and begin the process of healing and rebuilding. I discovered a tiny, serene house in the country, far from the turmoil and drama of my previous life. The place's serene serenity was exactly what I needed. With a warm cup of tea in my hands, I sat on my new home's porch and took in the tranquil surroundings. The sun was softly shining, birds were chirping in the distance, and the trees were swaying gently in the air. I experienced a wave of tranquility for the first time in what seemed like forever. This was a new beginning, a life devoid of suffering and manipulation. Although my trip had been challenging, it had been worthwhile. Not only had I survived, but I had overcome. I was free now that I had discovered my inner power and voice again. I grinned to myself as the sun started to set, illuminating the horizon with a pleasant light. I was at the perfect place at the right time. Though it was unclear, I had the power to create a happy, hopeful, and healing future for myself. This was my triumphant narrative, the story of a lady who would not give up. I was now living a life of independence and tranquility because I had persevered despite all the challenges.